Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 3 o'clock live show here in downtown Providence. I'd like to welcome my first guest, Johnson Thomas with Day One.
How you doing, Kate?
Thank you for joining us today. Prevention Education Specialist at Day One. It is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Let's start by just talking about Day One and the work that you do.
So for the people that don't know what Day One is, Day One's actually a sexual assault trauma center located on the east side of Providence. Day One's actually the only sexual assault agency that deals with sexual assault as a community concern.
And your role as a prevention education specialist, you're out there talking with the youth all year round. We'll go a little bit into what's taking place here in April, but tell us a little bit more about your role as prevention education specialist.
So as a prevention education specialist, my role is to have the opportunity to go out in the state and train the youth and also the Rhode Island community on awareness on sexual assault and preventing it from happening.
And you talk with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and I'm sure it's different for each age group that you approach.
Yeah, so I have the opportunity to talk to middle schoolers and high schoolers, like you said. And the middle school kids, they're very cute, young, kind of gives you that flashback of when you were a middle school kid. But it's cool because we have the opportunity to kind of talk to them and help teach them about things like sexual assault and give them tools and stuff like that so that they can prevent it from happening as well.
And here we are, it's 2018. We've seen in recent years more attention paid to consent. And that's something you talk with high school students about, yes?
Yeah, so consent is a pretty big issue that high school kids like to talk about. They like to hear about the consent, the ways. They also like to talk about the Rhode Island laws that we have for sexual assault as well. So that's a conversation and a discussion that we do have with the high school kids. And we do that through our workshop called Your Voice, Your View, which is a 4-session workshop. We talk about how to be an active bystander, and we kind of build up and give you those strategies to kind of intervene in a situation in which you could prevent sexual assault from happening maybe to you or even someone that you know.
And let's talk a little bit, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, it's April. You've got a couple of events taking place to, again, raise awareness. So what's taking place this month?
So this month, to end the month of an amazing awareness month for SAM, we're actually doing a 5K run over at Day One. This is our annual run. So we would love everyone to come join us. Whether you can run the event, whether you can walk the event, anything you want to do, even if you just want to come and enjoy the festivities with us, that'd be great. And I know that this is happening in May 12th.
That was my next question. When's the date taking place? So after the month, continue to raise that awareness, that 5K, walk, run, participate. And what else do we have coming up?
And then we also have our Dine for Day One. This is actually our second annual event that we're actually going to be doing. This is an event that kind of brings the community together, brings people that actually want to know about what we do, what are the programs that we have, and meet some of our staff. So this is an event that's happening at the Skyline at the Water Place. This is happening towards the end of June. Tickets are actually going at $100, but the $100 is going to cover great food for some of the wonderful, beautiful, great restaurants that we have here in Rhode Island, and also some pastries, and also valet, and then also we're going to have a silent auction as well, with all the proceeds and money actually going to Day One programming and services. So it's interesting.
So this is going to take place again. April is the awareness month, but May, the 5K, June, the Dine Out for Day One. Talk with us a little bit about your role. You're a Salve grad, you're from Massachusetts. Talk to us about your journey to working at Day One.
So my journey is that I had the opportunity to go to a wonderful school, Salve Regina University. And I graduated with my criminal justice degree. Had some wonderful, cool professors, which I wish I could shout out. But it's just a really cool experience, getting to learn people, figuring out the new city, the new town in Newport, being a kid from Massachusetts, like you said, Boston. But how I kind of got into this work was being a gentleman that was raised by his mother and 2 older sisters. I figured that this is the line of work I love to do, work with people, kind of spread back the great messages that my parents instilled in me. And I had the opportunity to do that with my position now over at Day One. So it's been great.
You going down the road for criminal justice, is that the career path?
Yeah, it's the path I would love to continue going down, hopefully. And hopefully probation department would be a great department to work in. Because
Day One, a lot of folks don't know, if you haven't, for say, been on jury duty, which I had the opportunity to as well, they're very involved with the judicial process and providing that resource, that interview resource to help especially young people if there's been a trauma, that they're involved and provide that from that legal perspective. Do you anticipate sticking around Providence and working here in the field in the coming months and years ahead?
I do, actually. And one of the things we actually have at Day One is the 24-hour hotline, which is our #1 thing, which gives people the opportunity, if they would love to kind of volunteer, to be trained to be an advocate. So this is one of the things I actually had to go through in the process of working at Day One. But that's one of the great things is seeing that people kind of calling us and wanting to be involved and wanting to be advocate for some of these survivors out there.
Because there are opportunities to help and, as you said, be involved, provide that resources. Because again, that 24-hour hotline must be so important. Again, if folks are scared to initially call law enforcement authorities, there is a resource there for them to go to.
Yeah, so having that one-on-one personnel contact with someone that is maybe in your community and someone that isn't a law enforcement officer could be something that could be warming. And it could be something that you can even establish a rapport with some of these individuals that you meet. And it makes them feel warm, it makes them feel loving, it makes it feel like someone cares, someone that isn't a police officer, someone that's pretty much like themselves and one of their peers in the community.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come in here. You've let us know about the events taking place after April's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Johnson, anything else you want folks to know about while you're here in studio?
No, I'd just love for you guys to follow us on all social media platforms. Go to our website, day1ri.org, and feel free to check us out and come to that 5K and check to see some of the other events we got going on for the rest of the year.
Important question, are you running?
I am going to run. I'm going to run with actually my family, so we're going to be there as well.
Fantastic. Again, lots coming up day one. Very involved with the community. Again, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We'll have all those links up on GoLocal. But Johnson Thomas, I appreciate your taking the time to come in studio. We'll be right back here with our next guest in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Don't go anywhere. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 3 o'clock show. Just had Johnson Thomas with day one. I am excited to welcome my next guest on, Nick Martell, Brown University graduate, Forbes 30 under 30, started CEO of Market Snacks. This is a way to provide some market information to millennials in a way that's quick, clear, and entertaining. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Kate. You nailed the description.
I did my homework, looked it up, because is there a hotter topic right now than the market? It's always a hot topic, but it seems to be right now one of the hottest topics.
No, you're right. It's always an exciting topic. There's so much going on in it. And what we found a few years ago is that there's almost too much news. You really need someone to come in, curate it, and then also make it quick, clear, and entertaining. And that's why we launched Market Snacks as a daily email newsletter.
So talk with us a little bit about the process, sort of how the magic is made. You came up with this concept, obviously saw the market need, so to speak, to approach specifically young people, and giving it in that format seems to be the sort of best of both worlds, providing that clear, concise info. Talk with us about the process of how you go through, get the information, and then package it to deliver.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, launching Market Snacks with my co-founder was one of the most exciting things in my life. We basically began this while working on Wall Street because we saw this need. People like us wanted to understand the business news, but didn't have a resource that made it quick, clear, and entertaining. So we began with this concept of how do we curate the most relevant stories for our generation? You know, everyone hears about GE or IBM. We also want to tell you about Lululemon, or why Chipotle sales are down because millennials aren't eating there as much, or how new companies coming in, startups, are IPOing, you know, listing their shares on the New York Stock Exchange, and what that means for a company like Spotify. So for us, it was about finding that content. And then my co-founder, Jack Kramer, and I, who is a freshman year roommate of mine, we basically decide what the 4 key stories are, and then we alternate every day who edits it. So we both write the content every day after work or after our business school programs, and then put it in the daily email newsletter.
So there's the secret sauce. Basically, it gave us how it actually, all the magic happens. And so talk with us about growth potential. You talk about you both working, being in school, you're juggling everything here. What's the 3-year plan? What's the 10-year plan, Nick?
Yeah, well, Market Snacks was started in an exciting way as a side hustle. We knew that we loved our day jobs, but we also wanted to have something entrepreneurial we could grow on the side. And fortunately, we had managers at our companies who let us continue to grow the company, monetize it, and scale it. Now we're at the point where we're both in business school. Jack's at the University of Michigan Ross. I'm at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. And we continue to run the company every single day. You know, you've seen us, Kate. We appear frequently on TV. We have the daily newsletter that comes out every day. We haven't missed a day of market action in 6 years. And for us, it's all about continuing to deliver that digestible financial news on a daily basis, but taking that concept to new news mediums. So beyond just the newsletter, but into TV and some other exciting areas you'll see in the next couple months.
Digital media, have you here right in the studio with us. Let's talk about looking at millennials, and let's talk just about investing in general. You know, what do you find from the younger generation, so to speak, to folks who might be more established in their careers? Is that something that you think about when you're putting out this information, again, to the sort of the younger set?
Absolutely. And what we find with millennials is that there's such a strong connection to very exciting brands. You know, millennials are attached to Fitbit, they're attached to Apple, they're attached to Under Armour, to GoPro, to these tech companies, to these brands, to these wearables, to fashion, to food and beverage, and they interact with these exciting companies every day. But very few of them are aware that these are stocks you can actually own. You can actually have equity in these companies. You can see how your business decisions, maybe not eating at Chipotle for lunch, affect the stock and the sales. So millennials have a natural connection with the markets. They may just not be aware of it. What we're trying to do is bridge that gap and make the business news, the Wall Street headlines, accessible for our readers.
That, I think you clearly hit the nail on the head. So as you talk about it being a side hustle, you're at school right now, you've been given this platform to provide this information to millennials. What after B school? Market Snacks, or on to the next thing?
Well, you know, this summer, my partner Jack and I are extremely excited that we'll be doing Market Snacks full time beginning in just a couple weeks. You know, to say it's a side hustle doesn't almost do it justice. We spend hours on Market Snacks every day to grow up our readership and to interact with our really excited audience. So we're excited that by committing to this more full time now, we can really put our resources to taking the digestible news concept and applying it to a bunch of new exciting areas of media.
Yeah, we talk about the side hustle. We know the side hustle is never really the side hustle because clearly you're working, this is your baby that you're getting off the ground. I mean, are we gonna see a movie based off of this in 10 years time? Is this the social network 2.0? What's your thoughts about what's been happening with Facebook lately? And you talk about delivering the information to millennials, but where do you see folks now, especially in the last 6-8 weeks with what we've seen with Facebook? You know, are we at a kind of critical juncture here?
Well, I think with Facebook, it's really a lesson we can all learn in terms of, brand and the power and importance of a brand, but in how quickly you can lose that trust a brand establishes with people. You saw that with Facebook. They can do 100 things right, but it's that 101st that may be wrong that can make you lose so much ground that you gain. And we're seeing it right now in real time with Starbucks. I mean, you look at the incident that happened at Starbucks the other day,
yes.
And Starbucks has a situation where they've always been a progressive brand. They've always put their workers first. They've always thought about customers, but one incident can have a really profound impact on the relationship customers have with the brand. I think it's a lesson for anyone who's running a business in that you really are held to a high standard. You can't afford to slip up.
And let's talk a little bit maybe about the intersection of politics and the market. How do you break that down for the millennials as we see what we hear from the administration? Do millennials care about that as well, in addition to the brand, the intersection of politics with the market?
You have to, because the reality is policy affects the markets in profound ways. We see this every day, and we love covering the market snacks. You saw that a couple weeks ago with the tariff news. Just the potential for trade tariffs has the power to sink markets. We've seen in 2018 stock markets that were at all-time highs have taken a hit, mainly for geopolitical reasons, whether it was going back and forth on trade, the potential for war. You saw what happened, for example, with Russia the other day. When sanctions get imposed on Russia, what happens to their economy and markets overseas quickly? So we live in a world that's incredibly connected. And I think that's why we've seen so much growth and excitement with market snacks, is because people know that everything is connected to business in some way. We just like to make sure you understand it clearly and in a fun way.
Clear and in a fun way, targeted towards millennials. Do you find folks of older generations embrace it as well because it has that sort of new hip vibe to it?
Absolutely. And this is something we're really excited about. And it's one of the things we think makes market snacks really stand out in media, is that, yes, we write with a millennial voice, but we're proud of the fact that we have a really even readership of men and women. We're proud that, yeah, while our core readership is millennials, we get testimonials and feedback all the time from people who aren't in that core demographic saying, finally, this is a resource, a daily newsletter that makes business and Wall Street understandable to me. So we found that our voice can appeal beyond just our target demographic, and we're proud of that.
And finally, of course, have to ask you about the Providence connection. Brown graduate. GoLocal's done pieces before looking at Brown graduates in the business world. Now, of course, not a de facto business program at Brown, but the impressive work that Brown grads do. Talk with us about how Brown prepared you for what you're looking to do next in your career.
Brown had a huge impact on me pursuing entrepreneurship in a number of ways. One, they do offer great entrepreneurship classes, like with Professor Hazeltine. Two, I think the school lends itself to taking risks and being creative. I took a creative nonfiction writing class that made me realize my passion for writing. And I wouldn't have taken that if Brown didn't have the flexibility. And then three, I was a college athlete at Brown. I loved playing on the lacrosse team there under Coach Lars Tiffany. And as a coach, he wasn't your typical Ivy League coach. He really encouraged us to do things differently, take risks, and take advantage of the academic opportunities at Brown. And I think on top of that, Providence couldn't be a better college city for you to be in. I mean, I just had the best time, whether it was eating out, getting East Side Pockets, or if my parents were visiting, going to Federal Hill to have a great Italian meal. Providence is a city that lends itself to creativity and just enjoying the great things about a really diverse culture that's in that city. So I think the combination of Brown and Providence really is the perfect foundation for entrepreneurs.
Well, Nick Martell, I appreciate your taking the time to be able to Skype in with us here at the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hopefully, if we get you back in Providence sometime soon, we'll have you in here. But just wanted to let folks know a little bit more about Market Snacks. We'll provide that link as well. But wanted to get the firsthand account of how this started, where it's going. Clearly, big things to come. Anything else you'd like viewers to know, Nick, while we have you here in studio?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that, first of all, I want to thank you and the whole Providence community because I felt like it was such an inspirational period in my life. So excited to be invited on the program, Kate. So thank you for having me. And then two, to the viewers, I hope you really jump in, subscribe, and sign up for Market Snacks. You'll be getting a daily email newsletter in your inbox every day, making the markets quick, clear, and entertaining. Because this isn't just business news. This is news that affects all of our lives every single day. And it's important to have a full understanding of it. It's even better when you can make it fun to read.
Well, Nick Martel and co. break it down at Market Snacks. Nick, I appreciate your taking the time to Skype in today. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, thanks. You heard it from Nick Martel, Brown graduate, Market Snacks. We'll have more links for you on GoLocal. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton. It is Wednesday afternoon news and politics. With me today is Steve Del Sesto. He's the receiver on the St. Joseph's Pension Fund failure. Steve, you've been on a couple times in the past. Last August, I think the state got surprised by the collapse, the largest collapse of a pension fund in Rhode Island's history. We're now 7-8 months later. Right. Give us a little overview as to where this is in the receivership process. I know you've been collecting a few documents from folks. Give us an idea of what the size and scope of the review of documents has been.
Okay. Well, as you said, since August 17th, we've been involved in this matter. We've actually only been receiving documents since approximately November of 2017. That's when we got permission and started sending out subpoenas. As a result of that, and many people know that we've had to go into court many times because we were receiving some resistance on getting those documents. We have been receiving documents at quite a impressive clip now. Right. I believe the special investigator reported to the judge at the last hearing that he was up around 700,000 to 800,000 documents, which is, not only is it a substantial number of documents, but the important thing is that every single document needs to be reviewed because you don't want to miss that one document that either tells you that the claim you thought you had, you don't maybe necessarily have, or that tells you that if you didn't think you had a claim, you actually might have one. So the special investigator has been hard at work reviewing all of them, and we still, to this day, continue to get documents. Most have produced in accordance with the schedule that they've either agreed to with the special investigator or that the court has required the parties to comply with. And now we're at the point where we're really discussing, and it is at this point discussing, we're not in court yet on this, but documents that the parties, various parties think either are privileged or confidential and need to be provided some special treatment or not produced at all for whatever reason.
Listen, GoLocal's been in the courtroom numerous times with you. The two parties that were the most difficult in providing the documents were the Diocese of Providence, in which you as the receiver and the special investigator, Max Wistow, sought repeatedly to the court forced them to provide those, and also the Attorney General's office, which I think surprised many. You would think the Attorney General would be motivated to address this and address this quickly, but that took months. I mean, that literally took from October to December to really get both those two entities, parties to it, different roles. Obviously, the diocese played the role of they once owned the hospital and were responsible for the fund.
Right. And, you know, it did take some time, and it's unfortunate that it took the amount of time it did, because every day that went by that we weren't getting documents from any party in this case was a day that delayed the investigation. And as I've said before, and I think you've reported before, time isn't on the side of this pension plan. So every day is actually very critical for the receiver, the special investigator, and the court to do the work that needs to get done. You're correct, it wasn't until about mid-December or so that the spigot really turned on in full as a result of multiple court hearings. And then the process took weeks after that to produce a large volume of documents, but still weeks. But I am at least happy to say that for the most part, with the exception of privilege and confidential, everybody has stuck to the schedule that has been either agreed to between the parties or that the court imposed.
And you may be battling over what is privileged and what is confidential. You know, in a fund that is now in receivership, it stupefies, I think, some as to why anything would be in those buckets for the most part.
Right. And, you know, and I've said this before as well, we just need to know the answers. The pension holders who are the victims in this case deserve to know what happened. And I understand as a lawyer the need to protect a client and to make sure that things are done in a way that provides order. But at the same time, as a receiver who is talking to these 2,800 people on a regular basis and understanding the stress they're under, the anxiety that this has caused, and I know the special investigator shares this, we just want as many answers as we can. And, you know, the legal issues aside, we want those issues disposed of quickly, and the investigation to get to a point where we can start holding people accountable.
A really important piece of news that's come out is that feds are really looking into this and have started subpoenaing different documents. You want to give an overview as to what's taking place there?
Sure. So and I reported this to the court at the last hearing, we've had discussions with the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which is the federal agency that ensures ERISA style. To
put it in a structure, it's kind of the FDIC of pension funds.
That's a good way to look at it. And we've had that discussion with them as a result of us initiating discussions with the PBGC. And to their credit, they actually contacted me very, very early on in this process, which is not typical, or at least not in my experience, it's not typical. But they have, as a result of our discussions and the direction in which we had told them that we were looking at potentially going on this, they had initiated their own investigation as to what happened with this plan in terms of how it was treated, why it was treated that way, why it was identified as a church plan, or should it have been identified as a church plan. And they've been subpoenaing documents from some of the same parties that we did. And we also have, they haven't subpoenaed me, but that's because we advised the PBGC that we're an open book. We will provide them with any information we have. Quite frankly, the only information we have is what the parties that we have subpoenaed have provided. So as soon as we receive something or find something that we believe would be helpful to them to make their decision, we're sending it along to them as well. But that process has been going on now with the PBGC since, I would probably say, sometime towards the middle to end of January was when I think the first subpoena by the PBGC was issued.
And that's an unusual state, an action by them in a case like this. This is an unusual situation because it had been deemed by the diocese a church plan, whether or not it is or is not is going to be a legal determination at some point by Judge Stern or some other
judge
or some other judge, and just define the difference between in layperson's terms, the difference between a church fund and a non-church fund.
In its most basic form, a church fund is a plan in which it is designated because of its relationship and oversight by a religious organization or a principal purpose organization, they call it. They determine it. If you are a church plan, putting aside whether or not that designation is appropriate or not.
Right.
If you say we are a church plan, then you are exempt from the requirements under ERISA. So that means that
federal reporting,
minimum contributions, all of those things that ERISA plans are required to do, a church plan is not required to do.
And that designation really goes to separation of church and state, correct? I mean, that's sort of the legacy of the claim.
Being a private plan, it really gets down to, is this a religiously based, overseen plan by which the federal government back, I believe it might have been, I want to say in the early 80s,
yeah,
had said that we are going to allow those plans to kind of function on their own without our oversight.
And I don't know that church plan members totally understood that distinction. They weren't really getting, you know, if you have a 401k, you're getting a monthly statement or quarterly statement. They weren't getting a monthly statement or quarterly statement, and in fact weren't getting anything.
They weren't getting anything, and they weren't required to get anything under church plan status. They were, from what I understand and what's been produced to us, they had received periodically letters and memorandum from the hospital advising them of the status of the plan generally, but they were not required under ERISA, and they did not get, at least for a very substantial period of time, any formal reporting that you or I would get, let's say, with our retirement or 401k.
And then the question of, does it remain a church plan, comes into question and has been looked at by the courts in other jurisdictions related to its being sold, transferred, not once but twice.
Right.
First into what is now in partnership with Roger Williams Hospital into the charter, what ultimately became Charter Care, and then Charter Care being sold off the second time. So could you possibly be a church fund during those two transfers?
That's right. And actually, I'm going to add a transfer to you when I became receiver.
Yeah, okay, right.
The question becomes you know, even if you say it was a church plan after the result of the first, after the result of the second, the question could also come, is it still a church plan? Was it a church plan when I was there?
And before that first transfer into partnership with Roger Williams, for about 8, 9 years, the diocese did not make any contributions into that fund.
Since 2000, when I took over the plan, the last contribution other than the $14 million that went in as a result of the Prospect transaction, the last contribution to this plan was September 2008, and that was for $1.5 million.
And then preceding that was?
Preceding that, there were contributions made. They were made on a much more regular basis than what they were after 2008,
yeah,
with none being made. But I have not gone back, the special investigator has, but I have not gone back in particular to see where their contribution levels were on a year-to-year basis as compared to what was recommended.
And there's about 2,800 people in the plan.
That's correct.
And the lack of funding to fully pay out all of those folks out to their retirement and passing is about an estimated $115, $125 million.
If this plan were to be a viable plan to pay all pension holders out, that number based on market conditions, things like that, and projections was approximately between 150 and 120. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot, right. So let's talk a little bit about, do you expect, you're in a process now, Max Wistow's a very accomplished special investigator. He had great success in recovering funds for the state of Rhode Island and the 38 studios, and also in a situation in which people even poo-pooed his engagement that he'd be able to recover any substantial amount of money. He recovered about $68 million, I want to say.
Yep.
Where is he and where are you? He works for you. Where are the two of you in this process right now?
So Max and his team have, as I said, they continue to review documents. As I reported to the court, one of the reasons why I asked for there not to be a benefit reduction at this point is because Max and his team were not yet at the point where they could make a, what I would call a formal recommendation to me with regard to who they thought a target would be in terms of viability, in terms of collecting money, and a recommendation on filing lawsuits. I would say we're probably still about 4 to 6 weeks away from that point, but that's not far now compared to where we were 7, 8 months ago. So he and his team, while they do continue to review documents, it's my understanding that they are putting together a report from my eyes so that I can sit down with them and have a very comprehensive discussion as to which direction we're going to go in with who.
And there's multiple players that may be targets of these lawsuits in the litigation. They could be, you know, across the board to any of the parties that held St. Joe's,
Yeah.
As well as different fiscal advisors and accountants and actuarials. I'm not naming names, but that class as well.
That's correct.
And potentially, this could have extensive litigation.
Yes.
And some might settle right away. Talk about that process and the time process on that.
Well, what we are, the way that we have proposed to do this and the way that the engagement with the special investigator was set up is we broke it down into what I'm going to call 3 phases. The first phase is the investigative phase, which we have been going through and continue to go through now. Once we get past the investigative phase, which is where the special investigator will make a recommendation as to who should be sued, then what we will do is we will and I still have to talk to the strategy of the special investigator on this, but in essence it'll be a discussion with those parties to see if there's a willingness to settle before we get into full-blown litigation. And then assuming that they do, we may get some that say yes, we will settle and it'll avoid the cost and time associated with litigation, and there are some that just may not, and then we go into the litigation phase. And unfortunately, while litigation settlement can happen at any time after litigation is commenced, it is a process that if it goes full term, you're talking years, not months.
And what do you say? I know you've had a very open process of communications with those retirees who are members of the plan. You've got dedicated websites to it. You have community meetings.
Which I have another one this Monday coming up at 5:30 at Rhodes on the Patuxent.
You love Rhodes. It's your favorite venue.
It's a good venue.
Is it the meatballs, the pasta?
We don't get any food.
No food.
Not even a bottle of water.
Not even a bottle of water.
But it's
don't you think the retirees deserve open bar? They've been ripped off for $125 million.
They deserve a lot more than an open bar. But it's a good venue. It's a nice venue. It's centrally located, and we have had, as you know, because you've been at some of them, we have had substantial attendance.
Hundreds and
meetings.
hundreds,
Yeah.
Upwards of 500, 600, 700.
Right. So the meetings, the attendance has dropped as we've gone on, and I think that that's a result of, hopefully, I hope it's a result of the fact that they feel informed, and they feel that there are multiple places for them to get the information, that they don't necessarily need to come to the meetings. But I continue to hold them because we continue to get a couple of hundred, couple to a few hundred.
Maybe you took their pitchforks away. Let's talk about, we've talked in legal, financial terms. Let's put the human face on this. You've had interaction with literally hundreds of them. I've met dozens of them.
Yep.
For the most part, these are women, primarily women.
Yep.
They worked in a hospital,
Yep.
in a diocese hospital. They got paid substantially less than their peers at Lifespan or Care New England groups. They did it because they had an absolute commitment to public health. They had a commitment to the church. Their benefits were substantially less. Mm-hmm. And here they are, in retirement. They're in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Do we have any Hundreds?
I don't believe we have anybody in their hundreds, but we have a couple that are very, very close.
Yeah, and their pension payments for their 40, 50, 60 years of work is minuscule.
Some of them are very, very small amounts of money that, notwithstanding the size of that check, they still rely on it for a day-to-day living. I've seen checks in the 20s and 30s, but these people rely on this money. Many of these people rely on this money as a substantial portion of their income. All very good people, very kind people, very well-intended people. And with this, they're angry, but they just want to know. They want to know what's happening.
You're very lucky that it's not Teamsters truckers.
Right.
They'd have you strung up by now. You know, what's been remarkable about it is it kind of broke, it seems like, as us, the news organization, in interacting with them, you know, kind of broke their heart in a lot of cases. It was everything they believed in. And then, and I want to go into this, the hospital conversion process, the government checking, being the watchdog on this process, dropped the ball, not only dropped the ball, it appears, but then blocked the disclosure of documents, and it took months to get those documents.
Yeah, I think, you know, from talking to many of the pension holders, I think the one common theme is they all feel betrayed. At one point or another, if not multiple points, whether it be from their time with the hospital, working what they were told they would get, to those that had retired and what they were confirmed that they would continue to get. And now through this process, I hope that Max and his team and the court and I have provided at least some ability to feel like there's somebody watching out for them at this point. But even at this point with the lawyering going on, and again, I'm not saying that what any group has done is improper in terms of asking the court to not require them to turn things over, but the lawyering piece is these people just want to know what happened.
Yeah, it certainly appears as a news organization, the Attorney General's office delaying and fighting to hold on to documents that have to be public documents. They were taken in a public process. There's no other way they could take the document. Is just inexcusable. I don't know how any other way. Listen, we've written on it, we've editorialized on it. There's no way to put lipstick on that big.
That's right. And I'll say, you know, I'm a lawyer, so I understand the process. But even in this process, there have been moments, and I know the special investigator has expressed his frustration as well. They're just head scratchers.
Yeah.
It's this is a public process. There was a public process that was part of this, and why there was such resistance on some levels is just it just makes you scratch your head.
Let's talk about the Hospital Conversion Act and what we should be looking for in the future. We had Peter Nerona on Friday. Just about every time he comes on, we have a conversation about it. You've now got, you know, more potential hospital conversions than you can shake a stick at right now, with Partners looking to buy Care New England, Charter Care looking to reopen Memorial, Charter Care and Brown looking to take over Care New England. Lifespan in negotiations with Partners. I think I got them all, but I'm sure there's a couple more coming that we haven't reported on. Our healthcare system is in complete flux. The economics are in complete flux. How can we do a better job? And, you know, have you thought about maybe writing the opinion piece for GoLocal on here are some real recommendations based on our experience of looking at this failure on what we need to do a better job in protecting people's livelihoods while they're working and their assets, their pensions.
Right. Well, I was involved in two hospital conversions. One very directly with Landmark, and one in a more periphery with Westerly Hospital, and now I'm seeing the result, the backlash of this one. So I've definitely seen it in action. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly on it.
Have you seen any good?
I have seen some good. I have seen some good.
That's good.
It's not all bad. I will say with this issue, and this issue is specifically because of this pension, I do believe, and I've spoken to a number of people about it, this is going to be for the legislature to decide, but I do believe that this process Nobody wants to hear me say it.
That was Bishop Tobin trying to bleep you out.
Okay. That this process, I'm going to leave that alone.
He has powers. Talk to people.
I think this process needs, the hospital conversion process, at least on the Attorney General side, needs some modification. I think that this St. Joe's pension problem that resulted from the Charter Care Prospect transaction shows that there needs to be, in instances where there is a pension like this or any type of a pension plan that needs to be dealt with, somebody with the financial expertise to review these types of plans and the impact of the transaction on the plan.
So Nerona said he's had conversations, and actually Seth Magaziner's been here a number of times talking about lending their office's expertise. Do you then, can the treasurer's office, with the resources they have, or do they need to go out and maybe do we need to put all these kind of third-party expertise to get that totally independent voice looking at these things simultaneously?
That's a good question. I have had discussions with Treasurer Magaziner as well as Peter Nerona on that issue and others. From the staffing, the treasurer would have to decide whether or not his office has the staffing that would be appropriate to address it. Keep in mind, I know we have a lot of things going on in the state right now, but generally speaking, the Hospital Conversion Act isn't utilized multiple times in any given year. So he may have the staff. He certainly has the expertise and could look at it. I think it would probably be, if it were me writing it, writing the amendment to the law, I would probably put the responsibility in the treasurer's hands, with giving the treasurer the discretion to bring in an outside independent evaluator if that were appropriate. Every circumstance is different. And so you may run into a situation where it's not necessary, but then others where it absolutely is. So I think that has to be done. And then even outside, that way, I guess I'll say this, that way it allows the Department of Health, who has a very concentrated and directed effort as part of the hospital conversion, to do their job.
Right.
It gives the Attorney General a very precise directive for his role, her role. And then you can bring the treasurer in, who has the financial expertise to address these issues if those arise on that side. And it lets people kind of stay within their scope of expertise rather than try to move into areas that they may not be.
Last issue, when looking at these things, Max obviously worked on 38 Studios, you worked on Landmark. These are big, complicated failures to some degree. This one's different because it's 2,800 people. Do you have to go almost back to DEPCO to find a similar situation? And even different because these are vulnerable, older Americans without the resources to recover. If you lost $100,000 but you were 40 years old, in DEPCO, if you got 20 more years of earning, these folks have no more earning opportunity.
I think this, even DEPCO, I think it's a difficult analogy. It's probably the closest you can get, but keep in mind, unlike 38 Studios, unlike DEPCO, those were state issues.
Yeah.
And you had the state there that could potentially assist financially. With Landmark, it was an independent hospital, and it was a sale of a hospital. It wasn't a failure of that hospital, but an attempt to keep it. This is retirees who gave their life, their service, their skill to their job with a hope to do something, and there's nobody there that can bail this out. We have to sue people in order to try to recover something here. The state isn't there for it.
Could the state be there, and does the state have a moral obligation based on the failure of the Conversion Act to protect the individuals that were going through the conversion?
That's a very difficult question.
Should we leave that to Max? Will he be slapping a little paper over at Gino Raimondo's office or Treasurer Magaziner's office?
I don't know. I won't even try to speak for the special investigator on that one. I certainly understand what you're saying on that. The problem here, and I think the difficulty here, is at the end of the day, notwithstanding the service that these retirees gave to this hospital, it was a private institution. And so, you know, you do have a public state-run process with the conversion,
Right.
which does a not-for-profit to a for-profit. Again, still private entity.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's a very difficult process, and whether or not the state should have any liability and therefore the taxpayers.
And I did say moral.
Right. And, you know, I think that you've heard from the legislature, both the House and the Senate, the President and the Speaker have
Yeah.
both come out very vocal about this. The governor has commented about it. So they're certainly aware of it, and they are sensitive to what these people are going through right now and what's happening with this pension plan. So they're there. The question is that do you hold should the state be held responsible?
Well, listen, in the case of 38 Studios, we're paying how many $1 million a year for bondholders, even when we had an insurance policy.
Right.
Seems to be we've got at least a little bit of a moral obligation on this one. Listen, Steve, I really want to thank you for coming on. I think it's been, you know, you've done exemplary work in keeping people informed on this process. It's been about as transparent and open as any process that we report on. So appreciate that.
We've tried.
And we're going to be right back. I want to thank again Steve Del Sesto, the receiver on St. Joseph's Pension Fund. We're going to be right back. Kate Nagel's going to have the 4 o'clock hour with news and politics, and she's got a number of interesting guests. Thanks very much.